At 42, Lucas was a man the world called self-made, billionaire, visionary, titan of industry. Magazines praised his sharp instincts. Investors trusted his name like scripture. Yet, standing there in the dim glow of the city below, he felt none of it. Just the hollow echo of footsteps on marble. The ghost of a life lived in boardrooms and press conferences, never in living rooms or bedtime stories. His phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Mariana. Still thinking about that weekend at the mansion? He stared at the words. The family mansion. The one place he hadn't set foot in since the divorce. 5 years. 5 years of pretending it didn't matter. 5 years of convincing himself that success was enough. He typed back, fingers stiff. Yes, I'll have the staff prepare it. We'll go Saturday. He sent it and immediately regretted it. Not because of Mariana. She was kind, intelligent, undemanding. No, the unease came from deeper. From the fact that the mansion wasn't just stone and wood. It was memory. It was the place where he'd once laughed over burnt pancakes with Clara. Where he'd knelt beside a crib that was never filled. He turned back to the window. Rain blurred the lights into streaks of gold and blue. He remembered the last time he'd seen Clara, her eyes dry, her voice steady, her hands folded neatly over a folder of divorce papers. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't begged. She'd simply said, "You're choosing your empire over everything else. I won't let you choose me half-heartedly." He'd told himself she was wrong, that he could have it all. But the truth had settled in slowly, like dust on unused furniture. Mariana didn't know about any of this. How could she? He never spoke of Clara. Never mentioned the months after the divorce when he'd driven past their old neighborhood just to see if the porch light was on. Never admitted that sometimes, in the quietest hours, he'd imagine a different life. One where he came home not to a silent penthouse, but to the sound of small footsteps and a woman who still looked at him like he mattered. He took a slow sip of whiskey. It burned, but not enough to drown the ache. "Maybe it's time to stop running," he whispered to the rain. He didn't know it yet. But the mansion held more than memories. It held a secret he never saw coming. A truth buried not in files or courtrooms, but in 3 small hearts that beat with his own rhythm. And in just a few days, when he walked through that grand oak door with Mariana on his arm, thinking he was reclaiming a piece of his past, he would instead stumble into a future he never knew existed, 3 pairs of curious eyes staring up at him from the very place he'd abandoned. But for now, in the hush of his penthouse, Lucas just stood there, a king without a kingdom that truly loved him, unaware that the real inheritance he'd been missing wasn't wealth, but family. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio tópico tu com dialogo como su fosso espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita moco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters 4:16 p.m. The morning sun spilled through the tall windows of the old Valente mansion. Not the cold, filtered light of boardrooms and penthouses, but warm, generous gold that kissed wooden floors worn smooth by tiny, running feet. Inside the sunlit kitchen, Clara stood at the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, kneading dough with quiet determination. Flour dusted her cheek like a soft secret, and the radio played a gentle bossa nova, Luis Bonfa, her favorite. Around her, life hummed in its sweet, chaotic rhythm. "Mama!" "Theo took my crayon again," Sophia cried, her voice a mix of indignation and theatrical despair, holding up a stubby red crayon like evidence in a trial. "I did not. She gave it to me." Theo shot back, cheeks flushed, clutching a lopsided drawing of what might have been a dragon, or a very angry dog. From the living room, Daniel, always the quiet observer, looked up from his book. "It's red. Everyone knows red's the best color. Maybe you should share." Clara smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Not yet, because beneath the rhythm of this ordinary morning, beneath the laughter, the squabbles, the smell of fresh bread, lived a truth she'd carried alone for 5 years. She glanced at the small silver locket tucked beneath her blouse, resting just above her heart. Inside, a faded ultrasound image. 3 tiny shapes, blurry but unmistakable. The day she'd found out she was carrying triplets, Lucas had been in Dubai, closing a deal too big to miss. She'd called him 3 times. He called back 2 days later. By then, she'd already decided. She wouldn't be another item on his calendar. And her children wouldn't grow up waiting for a father who only showed up when it was convenient. The divorce had been swift, clean, and utterly devastating. Lucas offered money, properties, security. She took only one thing: the right to raise her children in peace, far from headlines and expectations. And the mansion, technically still half his, became her sanctuary. Quiet, private, forgotten by the world that once watched their every move. "Mama!" Sophia tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide and soft now. "Why don't we have a daddy like Livia's?" Clara's breath caught. Not this question. Not today. She knelt, flowery hands gently framing her daughter's face. "You do have a daddy, meu amor," she said, voice steady but tender. "He just lives far away right now. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Does he know about us?" Daniel asked quietly from the doorway, book now closed in his small hands. Clara's throat tightened. She looked at her 3. So bright, so full of questions she'd been putting off answering. She'd promised herself she'd tell them when they were older, when they could understand, when he was ready if he ever would be. "I've kept your story safe until the right time," she whispered, pulling all 3 into a hug, breathing in the scent of crayons and sleep and childhood. "And when that time comes, I'll tell you everything. But for now you have me, and I will always be enough." The words were a promise and a shield. Later, after breakfast, while the children played in the sun-dappled garden, Clara stood at the window, watching them. Daniel dug in the soil with intense focus. Sophia twirled in circles, arms outstretched like a ballerina. Theo chased butterflies with unwavering determination. Her heart swelled and ached all at once. She'd built this life from silence and sacrifice. No glamorous galas, no luxury cars, just bedtime stories, scraped knees, and the fierce, quiet love of a mother who refused to let her children feel the weight of a father's absence as a personal failure. Sometimes, in the deepest part of night, she'd lie awake and wonder, would he even recognize them? Would he see himself in Sophia's stubborn chin, in Daniel's thoughtful eyes, in Theo's restless energy? She never hated Lucas. Not really. She mourned the man he could have been. The one who held her hand through her first miscarriage, who danced with her in the kitchen at midnight, who whispered dreams into her hair. But that man had vanished beneath the weight of ambition, and she'd learned to survive without him. Still, she kept his old coat in the back of the closet, just in case. Just in case one day he came back, not as the Tycoon but as the father. She didn't know it yet, but that day was closer than she thought. And when he walked through that door, expecting silence, he would find life. Loud, messy, radiant life. His own, reflected in 3 small faces who had no idea their whole world was about to shift. But for now, in the golden quiet of a Tuesday morning, Clara wiped her hands on her apron, took a deep breath, and stepped back into the kitchen to finish the bread. Because love, she knew, wasn't in grand gestures. It was in showing up. Every end's security system. Gate access requested. Guest. Lucas Valente. Her breath stopped. Not possible. She tapped the screen, heart pounding now like a trapped bird against her ribs. The live feed showed his black sedan idling at the iron gates, raindrops glistening on the hood. Behind the wheel, unmistakably him. Older, sharper, but the same set of his jaw, the same furrow in his brow when he was impatient. And beside him, a woman. Clara's stomach dropped. Elegant, poised, her hand resting lightly on Lucas's arm as he spoke to the guard. "No," Clara whispered, more to herself than anyone. He wouldn't, but he did. She'd never changed the guest protocol. Technically, the mansion was still co-owned. She'd assumed, prayed, he'd never come back. that the past was buried too deep for him to dig it up. Yet here he was, bringing someone new into the very house where she'd cried herself to sleep for months after he left. "Mama!" Sophia appeared in the doorway, crayon still in hand. "Who's at the gate?" Clara forced calm into her voice, though her fingers trembled as she turned off the alert. "Just someone from the city, about the garden permits." She moved quickly, gathering toys from the hallway, smoothing the couch cushions, folding the children's drawings off the dining table. Not out of shame, but protection. These walls held her children's laughter, their secrets, their innocence. She wouldn't let Lucas waltz in with a stranger and treat this sacred space like a weekend getaway. Outside, the gate groaned open, the crunch of tires on gravel. Then silence. Clara stood at the window, hidden behind gauzy curtains, watching as Lucas stepped out of the car. He looked up at the mansion, their mansion, with something like reverence. Rain misted his hair. The woman followed, adjusting her scarf, glancing around with polite curiosity. Clara's mind raced. What does he want? Had he found out? No. If he had, he would have come alone. Desperate. Not like this, calm, composed, arm in arm with another life. She took a breath, steel in her spine. Whatever this was, she wouldn't let it shatter the peace she'd built. But before she could decide whether to answer the door or pretend they weren't home, Theo's voice rang out from the garden. "Hey, mister, are you lost?" Clara's blood turned to ice. She rushed to the back door just in time to see Theo, curious, fearless Theo, trotting toward the driveway, holding up a soggy daisy he'd just picked. Lucas turned, startled. And then he saw him, really saw him. Theo with Lucas's exact eyes, his same unruly hair, the way he tilted his head when puzzled, exactly like Lucas did in every interview clip Clara had once watched in secret. Lucas froze. The color drained from his face. The woman, Mariana, smiled kindly. "Oh, what a sweet boy. Do you live here?" But Lucas didn't answer. He couldn't. He was staring at Theo like he'd seen a ghost, or a miracle. From the doorway, Clara watched, heart hammering. She stepped forward slowly, calling out with a calm she didn't feel. "Theo, come here, please." The boy turned, then ran back to her, daisy still in hand. "Mama, that man looks like me." Behind him, Lucas's breath hitched audibly. Mariana frowned, glancing between Lucas and the child. "Lucas?" He didn't hear her. His eyes were locked on Clara now, on the woman he'd left behind, standing protectively in front of a child who bore his face. "Clara?" His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. Who is this?" She met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "This is my son, Theo." A beat of silence. Rain fell softer now, almost reverent. Then Mariana, confused, touched Lucas's arm. "Your ex-wife? I didn't know you." "I didn't know either." Lucas cut in, voice cracking. He took a step forward, eyes wide, scanning the garden, the windows, the doorway. "Clara, how many?" Clara didn't answer right away. She simply held his gaze, and in that silence, the truth hung thick in the air, heavier than the rain. From inside the house, Sophia's voice floated out, bright and oblivious. "Mama, Daniel says the new bread tastes like clouds." And then Daniel appeared behind her, holding a slice, eyes sharp and observant as always. He looked at Lucas, then at Theo, then back at Lucas. His expression shifted just slightly, a child's intuition sensing something monumental. Lucas turned toward the sound, saw the second child, same eyes, same quiet intensity. And then Sophia peeked out from behind Daniel, blinking up at the strangers with open curiosity. Three. Lucas staggered back as if struck. His hand went to his chest, not in pain, but in sudden, overwhelming realization. Mariana stared, mouth slightly open, understanding dawning with slow horror. "Lucas, are these?" He didn't answer. He couldn't speak. He just stood there, drenched in rain and revelation, staring at the three small souls standing before him. His children, alive, breathing, real. in the very home he'd abandoned. And Clara watched him unravel, not with triumph, but with a sorrow so deep it ached. Sophia, ever the gentle soul, tilted her head. "Mama," she whispered, tugging Clara's sleeve. "Why is that man looking at us like that?" Clara's throat tightened. She crouched low, wrapping an arm around all three, her voice soft but firm. "It's okay, meu amor. Just stay close." But Lucas wasn't moving. He was breathing like a man who just surfaced from deep water. Gasping, disoriented, overwhelmed. Mariana finally stepped back, her voice low and careful. "Lucas, do you need a moment?" He didn't answer, couldn't. His gaze kept darting between the children, his children, as if afraid they might vanish if he blinked. "Clara," he finally managed, voice raw. "All three. They're mine?" Clara didn't flinch. She rose slowly, shielding them with her body, not out of anger, but instinct. "Yes," she said quietly. "They're yours. Born 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I tried to tell you, twice. You never returned my calls." He winced as if struck. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know," she said, and that quiet certainty cut deeper than any accusation. "That's why I stayed silent. Because if you didn't even notice I was gone, how could you possibly notice a baby?" Lucas opened his mouth, to argue, to apologize, to explain. But no words came. What could he say? That he'd been building empires while she was building a family with his name in their bones? Inside the house, the radio still played that same bossa nova, soft and haunting, as if the universe refused to pause for this earthquake. Then Theo, ever bold, stepped forward again. "Are you our papai?" he asked, innocent and direct, daisy still in hand. Lucas's eyes filled instantly. He dropped to one knee in the wet grass, not caring about his tailored trousers, his designer coat, his crumbling composure. I didn't know you existed," he admitted, voice breaking. "But if you are, then yes. Yes, I am." Sophia's eyes widened. She looked at Clara, searching for confirmation. Clara gave a slow, careful nod. "He is," she said, "but he has a lot to learn." Mariana watched from the edge of the driveway, her expression shifting from shock to quiet resignation. She'd walked into a story that wasn't hers, and she knew it now. She slipped her phone from her purse, fingers hovering. Not to call anyone, just to anchor herself in reality. Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "You left." Lucas looked at him, stricken. "I didn't know you were here." "But Mama was here," Daniel said simply. "Every night, every day." Lucas swallowed hard. "I know, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for that." The words hung in the air, sincere, desperate, maybe even true. But Clara knew better than to trust promises made in shock. She stepped forward, extending a hand, not to Lucas, but to Theo. "Come inside, all of you. It's getting cold." The children obeyed, but not before Sophia turned back and said softly, almost to herself, "Your eyes are like mine." Lucas closed his eyes at that. A tear escaped, tracing a path through the rain on his cheek. As Clara led the children inside, Lucas remained on his knees in the garden, soaked and shattered. Mariana approached slowly, crouching beside him. "You should go," she said gently. "This isn't about us anymore." He looked at her, gratitude and grief tangled in his expression. "I'm sorry." She gave a small, sad smile. "Don't be. Some stories aren't meant to be yours. They're meant to be theirs." She glanced toward the house, where 3 small faces now peeked through the window. "Take the time you need, but don't waste it." She kissed his forehead, a goodbye, not a lover's farewell, and walked back to the car. Alone now, Lucas stood. He didn't head for his car. Instead, he walked slowly to the front door, stopping just before the threshold. He raised a trembling hand but didn't knock. Inside, Clara stood just beyond the door, listening to his breath, to the quiet tremor in his hesitation. She knew what he wanted, but more importantly, She knew what the children needed. Not a grand entrance. Not a billionaire's apology. But proof. Real, daily, patient proof. From the hallway, Sophia whispered, "Mama? Can he stay?" Clara didn't answer right away. She looked at Daniel, who gave a small shrug. At Theo, who held up the daisy again. "For the papai," he said. And in that fragile moment, suspended between past and future, Clara made a choice. She opened the door. Lucas stood there, drenched, humbled, eyes full of a hope so raw it hurt to look at. "Come in," she said softly. "But not as the Tycoon, as their father, if you're ready to be one." He nodded, stepping over the threshold. Not into a mansion, but into a second darting. Not at the grand staircase or the crystal chandelier he'd once chosen with such pride, but at the small shoes lined neatly by the door. 3 pairs, different sizes, scuffed at the toes. Clara closed the door behind him with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. "You'll catch cold," she said, voice low, handing him a towel from the hall closet. Their fingers brushed, just for a second, and both flinched as if from a spark. "I don't care," he murmured, but he took the towel, rubbing it absently over his hair. His eyes kept drifting toward the living room, where the children sat on the rug, not playing, just watching him. Waiting. Sophia leaned toward Daniel. "Do you think he knows how to braid hair?" she whispered, just loud enough for Lucas to hear. Lucas's breath hitched. I don't," he admitted, voice rough. "But I'd like to learn." Clara crossed her arms, not coldly, but protectively. "Why now, Lucas? After 5 years of silence? Why walk in here like you belong?" He looked at her then, really looked, saw the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, the quiet strength in her posture, the way she held herself like a fortress around those children. "Because I didn't know they existed," he said, voice cracking. "But the second I saw Theo, it was like my heart remembered something my mind forgot. I felt it, like gravity shifted." He swallowed. "I can't unsee them, Clara. I can't go back to not knowing." She studied him, searching for the rehearsed charm, the polished CEO mask. But it wasn't there. Only raw, trembling honesty. From the couch, Daniel spoke without looking up from the book in his lap. "Mama says love isn't just saying sorry. It's showing up." Lucas turned to him, pain flashing in his eyes. "Then let me show up." Clara exhaled slowly. "Showing up isn't enough if you disappear again when it gets hard. These children aren't a project to fix or a deal to close. They're people, with hearts that break." "I know," Lucas said, stepping closer. "And I know I don't deserve a second chance. But if you'll let me, I'll stay. Not in a hotel. Not for a weekend. Here, in this house. Even if it's just on the couch. Even if you hate me." Clara didn't answer right away. She walked to the kitchen, and after a beat, Lucas followed, keeping a careful distance. She filled the kettle, her back to him. "You flew private jets while I sat in pediatric ERs at 3 a.m., she said quietly, not accusing, just stating a fact, like reading the weather. "You gave speeches about legacy, while I whispered lullabies to children who asked why their father never called." Lucas leaned against the counter, head bowed. "I was lost, Clara. I thought success would fill the emptiness. It only made it louder." She turned then, eyes glistening. "And now? What do you want?" He looked toward the living room, where Sophia had gotten up and was now standing in the doorway, holding out a crayon drawing. A stick-figure man with 3 smaller figures holding his hands. "That's you," she said shyly. "We made it, just in case." Lucas took the paper with trembling hands. "I want to be in your drawings every day," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I want to know Sophia's favorite song, and why Theo hates peas, and what book Daniel's reading tonight. I want to be the man they run to when they're scared, not the ghost they wonder about." Clara's breath trembled. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine it. Lucas at the breakfast table. Lucas helping with homework. Lucas hugging them goodnight. But fear coiled in her chest. What if he changed his mind? What if the board called, the markets shifted, and he vanished again? leaving 3 hearts even more broken than before. "All right," she said finally, setting the kettle down. "You can stay, but on my terms." "Anything," he said instantly. "No assistance. No calls during dinner. No leaving without saying goodbye. And you don't get to decide when you're ready to be their father. They do." She met his gaze, unflinching. "If one of them asks you to leave, you go. No questions." Lucas nodded, tears spilling over. "I accept." Just then, Theo ran in, holding up a sock with a hole. "Papai? Can you fix this?" Lucas froze. Then slowly, carefully, he took the sock. "I've never fixed a sock before," he admitted. "But I'll try." Theo beamed. "Mama says trying is how you learn." Clara watched as Lucas sat on the kitchen floor, fumbling with needle and thread Clara handed him. His hands, used to signing billion-dollar contracts, now trembling over mending a child's sock. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden streaks across the floor. And in that quiet kitchen, something new began. Not with grand declarations, but with a torn sock, a crayon drawing, and the fragile, trembling hope that maybe, just maybe, love could be rebuilt, one small stitch at a time. Each morning, he woke before dawn, not to emails or market reports, but to the soft sound of Clara humming in the kitchen as she packed lunchboxes. He watched her from the doorway unseen. How she tucked a note into Sophia's sandwich bag, how she gently relaced Theo's untied shoe, how she kissed Daniel's forehead even when he pretended to be too old for it. And each time, something inside Lucas cracked open a little more. By the 3rd day, he began to help. Not with grand gestures, but with quiet presence. He washed dishes while Clara read to the children. He folded laundry, badly with mismatched socks and crumpled shirts, but he tried. And when Sophia asked him again to braid her hair, he sat on the floor behind her, fingers fumbling through strands of chestnut brown, while she patiently corrected him. "Not so tight, papai, papai." The word still sent a shiver through him. Part joy, part guilt, all wonder. But the mansion itself seemed to hold its breath. Every hallway, every room, carried echoes of what once was, and the weight of what might become. One evening, as Lucas carried a basket of firewood to the hearth, he passed the grand staircase and paused. There, on the wall, was a photo he didn't remember. Clara, radiant and 8 months pregnant, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other holding a single sunflower. She was smiling, but her eyes held a loneliness he hadn't seen then. He touched the frame, throat tight. "You were alone," he whispered. From behind him, Clara's voice was soft. "Not alone, just waiting." He turned. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, but her gaze was distant, lost in memory. "You never told me you were pregnant," he said. Not accusing, just aching. "I did," she said simply. 3 times. Voicemail, email, a letter I hand-delivered to your office. Your assistant said you were in a closed session. You never replied. Lucas closed his eyes. He remembered that week. A hostile takeover. Sleepless nights. He'd silenced his phone, blocked all non-essential notifications. He'd told himself it was for the company, for their future. He hadn't realized he was erasing his real one. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I failed you before I even knew I had children." Clara walked closer, stopping just an arm's length away. "You didn't fail me, Lucas. You failed them. And that's the part you have to earn back." Before he could respond, Theo came barreling down the hall, clutching a broken toy car. "Papai, can you fix Lightning McQueen?" He crashed into the wall. Lucas knelt, taking the toy. "I'll try, buddy." As he fumbled with the tiny screws, Daniel appeared, holding a book. "Mama says you used to build skyscrapers," he said, eyes sharp. "Can you build a fort?" Lucas looked up, heart swelling. "If you help me, yes." That night, instead of retreating to the library, Lucas stayed in the living room. He and Daniel dragged blankets and chairs, stringing lights from the ceiling. Sophia arranged pillows. Theo supervised. And Clara watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, but her lips curved in the faintest smile. When the fort was finished, the children crawled inside, dragging Lucas with them. "Tell us a story," Sophia pleaded. Lucas hesitated. "I don't know any good ones." "You're in one now," Daniel said quietly. And so Lucas began, not with dragons or princes, but with truth. Once, there was a man who thought he had everything, until he realized the most precious things were the ones he never knew he'd lost. The children listened, wide-eyed. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Inside, the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls of their makeshift castle. Later, when all three were asleep, curled together under blankets, Lucas still sitting among them, Clara approached and handed him a cup of tea. "He's getting attached," she murmured, nodding toward Theo, who had fallen asleep clutching Lucas's sleeve. Lucas looked down at the small hand wrapped around his arm. "I'm getting attached too." She studied him in the firelight. "What happens when your world calls you back? When your board demands your return? When the headlines start asking why Lucas Valente vanished from his empire?" He didn't look away. "Then I'll tell them my empire was never in boardrooms. It was here, in this house, in these three hearts." Clara held his gaze for a long moment. Then, softly, "Prove it." And as the clock struck midnight, the old mansion, once a monument to a marriage that crumbled, began to breathe again. Not with ghosts, but with hope, with second chances, with the fragile, beating pulse of a family learning to trust each other. One shared silence, one mended toy, one quiet good night, papai at a time. But deep in Lucas's pocket, his phone vibrated, unseen, unheard. A message from his CFO. "Emergency board meeting. Shares dropping. We need you back. Now." He didn't check it. His screen had gone dark again, but the message still echoed in his skull like a siren. "Your presence is non-negotiable. The future of the company hinges on you." He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he saw Theo's hand clutching his sleeve, heard Sophia whispering, "Don't go, papai." In her sleep, felt Daniel's quiet gaze weighing whether he was real or just another dream. Now, the children were in the garden with Clara, planting sunflowers, Clara's favorite, and now, unknowingly, his too. He could hear their laughter drifting through the open French doors, light and unburdened. The kind of sound that used to feel foreign to him but now felt like home. He lifted his phone again, typed a reply, "I'm not coming back," deleted it, typed, "Give me one more week," deleted that too, because the truth was, he didn't know what he could promise. And after 5 years of absence, empty words would destroy more than silence ever did. Just then, Sophia ran inside, cheeks flushed, holding a muddy trowel. "Papai, you're missing it. Mama says sunflowers follow the sun, so if we plant them here, they'll always look happy." He forced a smile, pushing the phone aside. "Then we better make sure they get plenty of light." He followed her out, kneeling beside the flower bed where Clara was smoothing the soil. She glanced at him, just once, and he saw the question in her eyes. "Are you staying? Or are you already leaving?" Before he could speak, Theo tugged his sleeve. "Papai, do you know what this flower is called in Portuguese?" Lucas shook his head. "No, buddy. Tell me." "Girasol," Theo said proudly. "It means sun follower. Like us, we follow Mama. And now, we follow you too." Lucas's throat closed. He looked at Clara. She didn't smile, but her eyes, oh, her eyes, softened just a fraction. That afternoon, as the children napped, Lucas found Clara in the library, dusting the shelves. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, heart in his throat. "I got a message from the board," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "And I didn't answer." She paused, a book halfway back on the shelf. "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid," he admitted, voice low. "Afraid that if I step back into that world, even for a day, I'll disappear again. That I'll tell myself it's temporary just to stabilize things. And then months will pass. And these moments, the fort, the sunflowers, the way Sophia says my name, They'll be gone. Clara finally turned. Sunlight caught in her hair, turning it gold. "You're not the same man who left," she said slowly. "I see that. But love isn't just about feeling changed. It's about choosing every single day not to walk away." "I want to choose them," he said fiercely. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not enough?" She stepped closer. "You already are. Not because you're perfect, but because you're here, trying." He looked down, shame creeping in. "I should have been here from the beginning." "You can't change the beginning," she said gently. "But you can stay for the rest of the story." Just then, Daniel appeared in the doorway holding a photo album. "Mama, can Papai see the baby pictures?" Clara hesitated, just a heartbeat. Then she nodded. They sat together on the worn velvet sofa, the three of them, Lucas in the middle, Daniel on one side, Sophia and Theo squeezing in on the other. Page after page revealed their first smiles, first steps, first days of school. Lucas traced each photo with trembling fingers, tears falling freely now. "This is me holding Theo?" he whispered, staring at a picture of a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. "Yes," Clara said softly. "You missed it, but you're seeing it now." He looked at her, eyes shining. "Thank you for keeping them safe, for keeping me a part of their story, even when I wasn't here." She didn't answer with words, but her hand brushed his briefly, gently, and in that touch, years of silence, grief, and longing began to mend. Later that evening, after bedtime stories and soft goodnights, Lucas stood alone on the back porch, staring at the stars. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Lucas?" came the voice of his longtime CFO, tense and urgent. "Are you coming back?" Lucas took a deep breath. The scent of earth, of sunflowers, of home, filled his lungs. "No," he said, voice steady. "I'm not coming back to the office, but I am coming back to my family. And if that means stepping down, then so be it." He ended the call, looked up at the sky, and for the first time in his life, Lucas Valente didn't feel like a tycoon. He felt like a father. Itchin, coffee in hand, the warmth he'd felt the night before met a wall of quiet steel. Clara stood at the counter, slicing fruit with precise, deliberate strokes. She didn't look up when he entered. The children were at the table, eating breakfast in unusual silence. "Good morning," Lucas offered, forcing cheer into his voice. Sophia gave a small wave. Theo buried his face in his oatmeal. Daniel just watched him, expression unreadable. Lucas set his mug down. "Everything okay?" Clara finally turned. Her eyes were calm, but guarded, like a lake frozen over, hiding currents beneath. "Sit down, Lucas." He did. She wiped her hands slowly, then crossed her arms. "You told your company you're stepping away. That's big. And I know it cost you, but I need to be sure you understand what that means here." "I do," he said quickly. "I'm all in. No distractions. No. She cut in, voice firm but not unkind. "You don't get to declare your devotion like it's a press release. These children aren't shareholders. You can't just announce your commitment and expect trust to follow." He flinched. "I'm trying, Clara. Trying isn't the same as being ready," she said, stepping closer. "You walked in here 5 days ago expecting to impress someone, your girlfriend, your ego, I don't know. But you stumbled into a life you never knew existed. And now you want to claim it like it's yours to take." "It is mine," he said, voice cracking. "They're my children." "Yes," she said, eyes flashing. "But you didn't raise them. You didn't hold them when they cried from nightmares. You didn't stay up all night with a feverish Theo. You didn't explain to Sophia why her daddy's name isn't on her birth certificate. You weren't there when Daniel asked, at 4 years old, if he was a mistake because his father never came." Lucas bowed his head. The words landed like stones in his chest. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll spend every day of my life making up for that. But Clara, I'm here now, not for a photo op, not for redemption, for them." She studied him for a long moment. Then softer, then prove it with time, not just words. Before he could respond, Daniel slid off his chair and walked over, holding out a small wooden boat he'd been carving in woodshop at school. "I made this for you," he said quietly. "It's not perfect. The sail's crooked." Lucas took it with both hands, as if it were made of glass. "It's beautiful. It floats," Daniel added. "I tested it in the fountain." Lucas looked at him, really looked, saw the hope beneath the caution. The boy testing the waters just like his boat. "Can I keep it in my room?" Daniel nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. But then Clara spoke again, her voice low. "There's something you need to understand, Lucas. I didn't hide them from you out of spite. I protected them because I didn't know if you'd ever be the kind of man who could love them without conditions, without needing them to be perfect or impressive or useful to your image." He met her gaze raw and open. "I don't need them to be anything but mine, and I don't need an image. I just need a chance to be their father. Not the tycoon, not the ghost, just Papai." Clara's eyes shimmered. She turned away, busying herself with the dishes, but not before Lucas saw the tear she quickly wiped. That afternoon, as the children played in the garden, Lucas found her on the back porch, folding laundry. He stood beside her in silence for a while, then picked up a small shirt, Theo's, and began folding it with clumsy care. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "Not of losing my company, but of losing this. Of them realizing I'm not who they hoped I'd be." Clara paused, a sock in her hand. "Then stop trying to be perfect. Just be present. Even when it's hard. Even when you don't know what to say. Especially then." He nodded. "I will." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time her guard lowered just a little. "They already love you, Lucas. That's the dangerous part. So don't break their hearts. Because if you do, I won't be able to protect them the second time." He swallowed hard. "I won't." From the garden, Sophia called out, "Papai, come see the butterfly." He turned, but before he walked away, he gently placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. Just for a second, a silent promise. She didn't pull away. And inside the house, on the kitchen counter, Lucas's phone buzzed once more, then fell still. He didn't check it. He ran toward his daughter's voice, toward the fragile, fluttering miracle in her cupped hands, toward the life he'd almost missed. Because now he knew, some choices aren't made in boardrooms. They're made in backyards with muddy knees and open hearts. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, standing at the gate in a simple linen dress and no makeup, her expression calm but resolute. When Clara saw her through the security monitor, her stomach tightened, not with jealousy but with dread, because she knew, even before opening the door, that Mariana hadn't come for Lucas. She'd come for closure. Lucas was in the garden, helping Theo rebuild his toy racetrack for the third time that week. When he saw her, he stood quickly, brushing grass from his jeans, heart pounding in a way it hadn't since the day he first saw the children. "Mariana," he said, voice careful. "I didn't expect you." She offered a small, sad smile. "I know, but I needed to see you. Not as your assistant, not as your whatever I was, just as someone who cares." He glanced toward the house, where Clara stood in the doorway watching silently, arms crossed but not hostile. The children peered from behind her legs, curious, not afraid. Mariana followed his gaze. Her eyes softened. "They're even more beautiful in person." Lucas nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, they are." She stepped closer, voice low. "I read the news, Lucas. You resigned as CEO. The markets are in chaos. Your name's trending for all the wrong reasons. And yet, you look more at peace than I've ever seen you." "I am," he said simply. She looked at him, really looked, and sighed. "I came to understand something. You didn't leave me. You left a life that was never yours to begin with. And these children, they're not a detour. They're your destination." He didn't speak, just nodded, eyes glistening. Mariana turned toward Clara now, taking a few respectful steps forward. "Clara, may I?" Clara hesitated, then opened the gate. Mariana walked in slowly, as if entering a sacred space. She crouched down to the children's level. "Hi, I'm Mariana. I'm a friend of Lucas's. Sophia tilted her head. Are you our new mama? Mariana's breath caught. She smiled gently. No, sweetheart, I'm not. Your mama is right there. And she's perfect. She glanced at Clara with quiet respect. I just came to say goodbye. And to thank you. Clara frowned slightly. Thank me? For giving him back to them, Mariana said softly. For not letting bitterness win. For raising these three beautiful souls with so much love that even a man like Lucas could find his way home. Clara's eyes filled. She looked away, blinking fast. Mariana rose, turning back to Lucas. I won't pretend it doesn't hurt, but love isn't always about keeping someone. Sometimes, it's about letting them go where they're truly needed. He reached for her hand. You deserve so much more than I ever gave you. I know, she said, squeezing his fingers once before letting go. And I'll find it. But you've already found yours. She glanced at the children again. Theo now holding Lucas's hand. Sophia smiling shyly. Daniel observing with quiet wisdom. Take care of them, she whispered. And don't ever doubt that this is where you belong. Then, with a final nod to Clara. Silent, mutual, full of understanding, Mariana turned and walked back through the gate without looking back. Lucas stood rooted to the spot, watching her go. A storm of gratitude and grief swirling inside him. Inside the house, Clara poured 2 cups of tea. When he finally came in, she handed him one without a word. He took it, voice rough. She was good to me. She saw you clearly, Clara said, even when you couldn't see yourself. He looked at the children, now back in the garden, drawing chalk rainbows on the patio. I thought I was bringing her here to show off my life. Instead, I walked into the only part of it that ever mattered. Clara sat beside him at the kitchen table. She let you go with grace. That's rare. He turned to her, eyes searching. Do you think there's any chance for us? Not like before, but something new, built on who we are now. Clara didn't answer right away. She watched Sophia trip over her own feet, laugh and get back up. We're not the same people, Lucas. And love isn't about returning to what was broken. It's about choosing every day to build something that can hold the weight of truth. He nodded slowly. I can live with that. Just then, Daniel walked in, holding a piece of paper. Mariana dropped this, he said, handing it to Lucas. It was a note, written in neat cursive. You were never lost. You were just waiting to be found by the people who needed you most. M. Lucas folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Next to the wooden boat, next to the crayon drawing, next to his heart. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and rose. And inside the old mansion, the walls no longer echoed with absence. They hummed with presence, with second chances. Gling over Daniel's impression of their grumpy neighbor's poodle. When Sophia grew quiet, she pushed her peas around her plate, then looked up at Lucas with eyes too old for her 7 years. Papai, she asked, voice small. Are you going to stay forever? Lucas froze, fork halfway to his mouth. He exchanged a glance with Clara, just a flicker, but it was enough. They both knew this moment would come. The honeymoon of reunion couldn't last forever. Reality always knocks. He set his fork down gently. I want to, Sophia. More than anything. But you left before, she said, not accusing, just stating a fact, like the sky is blue or rain is wet. Mama said you didn't know about us. But what if you forget again? The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Theo looked between them, lower lip trembling. Daniel stopped mimicking the poodle. Even the rain seemed to hush. Lucas slid from his chair and knelt beside her. I didn't forget you, sweetheart. I never knew you were here. But now that I do, my whole world is you three. Every heartbeat, every breath. I'm here because of you. But grown-ups lie, Theo whispered, eyes wide. Livia's daddy said he'd come back. He didn't. Clara's heart shattered. She hadn't realized they'd been listening to playground whispers, absorbing adult pain like sponges. Lucas reached out slowly, giving Theo space to pull away. When the boy didn't, he took his hand. I'm not Livia's daddy. and I won't make promises I can't keep. But I can tell you this. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. And even then, I'll write you every day. I'll send silly drawings. I'll wait outside school if you want me to, because you're my family. And family doesn't disappear. Sophia's eyes filled. Even when we're mad at you? Especially then, Lucas said, voice breaking. Because love isn't just for happy days. It's for hard ones too. Daniel finally spoke, quiet but piercing. Then why did you leave, Mama? The question hung like a storm cloud. Clara opened her mouth, to soften it, to redirect. But Lucas stopped her with a look. He deserved this. All of it. I was lost, he said honestly. I thought being successful meant never showing weakness. I thought love was something you earned by achieving more. I didn't know that love was just showing up, like Mama did, every single day. He turned to Clara then, eyes raw. I left because I was afraid I wasn't enough. And by trying to prove I became the one thing I never wanted to be, absent. Clara's breath caught. She hadn't heard him say it so plainly before. Not the shame, not the fear beneath the ambition. Sophia climbed down from her chair and wrapped her arms around his neck. You're enough now, she whispered. Theo threw his arms around Lucas's waist. Don't go. Daniel didn't hug him, but he slid his wooden boat across the table toward him. Keep it in your pocket, he said. So you remember. Lucas gathered them close, tears streaming silently down his face. And Clara watched, arms crossed but heart wide open, as the man who once commanded boardrooms now knelt on a kitchen floor, held together by three small souls who decided to trust him, despite every reason not to. Later that night, after bedtime stories and whispered, I love yous, Clara found Lucas on the porch, staring into the rain, the wooden boat clutched in his hand. They're scared, he said without turning. And they should be. I broke something before I even knew it existed. You're mending it, she said softly, joining him under the awning. Am I? He looked at her, vulnerable in a way the world would never see. Or am I just creating a new kind of damage? Being here now, only to vanish again when something bigger calls? Clara stepped closer. Then don't let anything be bigger. She paused. You resigned. You walked away from your empire. But are you ready to walk away from the idea of yourself as a man who must always be in control? Because fatherhood isn't about control, Lucas. It's about surrender. He exhaled, long and slow. I'm trying. I know, she said. But trying won't quiet their nightmares. Only staying will. Inside the house, a floorboard creaked. They both turned to see Sophia standing in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I had a dream you were gone, she said, voice trembling. And the house was empty. Lucas didn't hesitate. He walked to her, scooped her up, and carried her back to bed. Clara followed, tucking the blanket around her while Lucas sat on the edge of the mattress, holding her hand until her breathing slowed. As they stepped back into the hallway, Clara whispered, They don't need a perfect father. They need a present one. He nodded, leaning against the wall, exhausted but resolute. Then that's who I'll be. But as they stood there in the dim hallway, the rain outside masking the sound of a distant car engine pulling up to the gate, neither of them noticed the headlights cutting through the trees. A black sedan. Unmarked. Unknown. And in the morning, the real test would begin. Not from within, but from the world Lucas thought he'd left behind. Because some ghosts don't stay buried. A tension in her shoulders Lucas had never seen before. She hadn't told him about the car last night. Not yet. But she'd watched it from the upstairs window until it drove away, tires crunching softly on wet gravel. No plates she recognized. No logo. Just silence and suspicion. Now, as she poured coffee, the doorbell rang. Not the gate chime. The doorbell. Someone was already inside the property. Lucas stood slowly, wiping glue from his hands. You weren't expecting anyone? Clara shook her head, eyes narrowing. No, she walked to the foyer, Lucas close behind. Through the peephole, she saw him. A man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase, standing with the polite impatience of someone used to doors opening quickly. She opened the door just enough for the chain to hold. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice cool. "Good morning," the man said with practiced calm. "My name is Eduardo Ribeiro. I'm with the Valente Group's legal counsel. I'm here to speak with Mr. Lucas Valente." Lucas stepped forward, recognition dawning. "Eduardo? What are you doing here?" The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Valente, the board has filed an emergency petition. They claim your sudden departure without formal transition has jeopardized shareholder interests and company stability. They're seeking a temporary injunction to freeze your personal assets pending your return to active leadership." Clara's breath caught. Lucas's face went pale. "You came all the way here to threaten me?" Lucas asked, voice low. "I came to deliver a notice," Eduardo said evenly. "And to remind you that walking away isn't as simple as closing a door, sir. There are consequences." From behind them, Sophia appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Papai? Who's that?" Lucas instinctively moved to block her view. "Go back upstairs, sweetie." But Sophia saw the man's cold eyes, saw the way her father's shoulders tensed like a shield. She turned and ran. Not away, but to Theo and Daniel's room, whispering something urgent. Clara's voice was ice. "You don't bring legal threats to a family home before breakfast, especially not in front of children." Eduardo's gaze flickered past her, into the house. "Are these his children?" "They're people," Clara snapped. "Not assets, not leverage." Lucas stepped between them. "You can serve me papers, but you will not speak to me like I'm a fugitive in my own home." Eduardo sighed, almost sympathetically. "No one wants this, Lucas, but the board is losing control. Investors are panicking. If you don't return within 72 hours, they'll move to remove you entirely and seize control of your shares, including the co-ownership of this property." Clara's blood ran cold. "The mansion." Lucas's hands balled into fists. "You're using my children's home as a bargaining chip?" "I'm stating facts," Eduardo said. "This estate is still legally half-owned by the Valente Group until the divorce settlement is fully ratified, which, due to your absence, was never finalized." Clara's stomach dropped. She'd assumed the ownership was settled. She'd been so focused on protecting the children, she'd let the legal details drift, trusting that silence meant safety. Now, that silence had become a weapon. Eduardo handed Lucas a sealed envelope. "You have 3 days." As the car pulled away, Lucas stood frozen on the porch, the envelope trembling in his hand. Inside, the children huddled in the hallway, faces pale. "Are they taking our house?" Theo asked, voice small. Daniel's jaw was set. "They can't. It's ours." Clara knelt, gathering them close. "No one is taking anything, I promise." But her eyes met Lucas's, and in that look, both knew. Promises weren't enough against lawyers and ledgers. Lucas sank onto the front steps, head in his hands. "I thought I could just walk away, but the empire I built, it's got claws." Clara sat beside him, not touching, but close. "You don't have to go back," she said softly. "We'll fight it. We'll sell other properties. No." He cut in, voice raw. "If I run, they'll chase us forever. But if I go back, even for a little while, I can protect you. I can sever the ties cleanly, transfer my shares, make sure this house is yours, legally, fully, forever." She stared at him. "And what about the children? What about you?" He looked through the window, where Sophia was now drawing fiercely on a piece of paper. A house, surrounded by sunflowers, with 4 stick figures holding hands. "I'll come back," he said, voice breaking. "I swear it. But I need to fix this the right way. Not with silence. With strength." Clara's eyes filled. "You say that, but last time you left, you didn't come back for 5 years. This time is different," he whispered, "because now I know what I'm coming back to." From inside, Daniel opened the door and stepped onto the porch, holding his wooden boat. He placed it in Lucas's palm. "Take it with you," he said quietly. "So you remember." Lucas closed his fingers around it, tears spilling over. "I'll be back before the sunflowers bloom again." But as he stood, suitcase packed by midday, the children lined up in the driveway, silent, hearts in their eyes. Clara knew the real battle wasn't in courtrooms or boardrooms. It was in their trust. And if he didn't recognized, but he didn't unpack, didn't settle, he went straight to the office. The boardroom was colder than he remembered. Glass, steel, and judgment. 20 faces turned as he entered. Some relieved, others wary, one openly hostile. Eduardo stood near the head of the table, arms crossed. "Glad you came to your senses," said Helena, the lead director, her voice sharp as cut crystal. "I didn't come back to resume," Lucas said, setting his briefcase down with deliberate calm. "I came to end this cleanly." A ripple of murmurs. "You can't just walk away," another board member snapped. "You built this empire." "I built a machine," Lucas corrected, voice steady but heavy. "And I let it run me instead of the other way around. But I won't let it take what matters most." He opened his briefcase, not to pull out reports but documents. "I'm transferring full control of my voting shares to an independent trust. You'll manage operations. I retain no executive power. And in exchange, you drop all legal claims against my personal assets, especially the Valente family estate." Silence. Helena narrowed her eyes. "You'd give up everything? For a house?" "For my children," he said simply. "They live there. Their mother raised them there. It's not property. It's their childhood." Eduardo stepped forward. "The board needs time to review." "No." Lucas cut in, voice firm for the first time in weeks. "You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. Sign the release, or I file for full dissolution of my stake and trigger a shareholder revolt that'll tank the stock for months. Either way, I'm done." He turned and walked out, heart hammering. Not with fear, but clarity. That night, alone in the penthouse, he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat by the window, the wooden boat in his palm, staring at the city lights that once meant victory but now felt hollow. He opened his phone, hesitated, then dialed. Clara answered on the third ring. Her voice was quiet, guarded. "You called. I just needed to hear their voices." A pause. Then softly, "Hold on." Muffled sounds. A whisper. Then, "Papai." Sophia's voice, small but bright. His breath caught. "Hey, sunshine. Did you see the moon? It's really big tonight." "I did," he said, smiling through tears. "It's the same moon we have at home. Are you coming back soon?" "I'm finishing something important so I can stay forever," he said gently. "Can you be brave for me just a little longer?" "I'm braver than Theo," she declared. "He cried when you left." From the background, Theo's indignant voice. "I did not." Lucas laughed. A real laugh, and for a moment the penthouse didn't feel so empty. Then Daniel came on, quiet as ever. "Did you bring the boat?" "In my pocket," Lucas said. "Every day." "Good," Daniel said. "Because rain's coming. Boats need to be ready." Lucas closed his eyes. "I'll be ready too." When Clara came back on, her voice was softer. "They asked for you all day. Drew pictures. Left one on your pillow." He swallowed hard. "Tell them I'm fighting for them. Not with money. With truth." "I know," she said. And then, after a breath that felt like a lifetime, "Come back whole, Lucas. Not just in body. In heart." "I will." He ended the call and walked to the closet. On the top shelf, behind old shoeboxes, he found it, her old coat, the one she'd left behind. He brought it to his face. Still smelled like lavender and rain. He didn't cry. Not yet. But as he sat there in the dark, coat in his arms, boat in his hand, he made a silent vow. No more empires. No more ghosts. Just them. Because love wasn't measured in boardrooms or billions. It was measured in bedtime stories missed, and the courage to come back before it's too late. And somewhere, in a sunflower-filled garden far from the city's glare, 3 small hearts waited. Not for a tycoon. "You've got 1 hour," she said without greeting. "Sign the transition agreement, or we proceed with asset seizure." Lucas didn't sit. I'm not signing anything that doesn't include full, irrevocable release of all claims against the Valente family estate, including retroactive ownership confirmation in Clara Mendez's name. Eduardo shifted. That's not standard. It's non-negotiable, Lucas said, voice calm but edged with steel. You want my shares? Fine. But you get them clean. No strings. No shadows. And you never, ever contact my children again. A silence fell. Heavy. Final. Then Helena sighed, removed her glasses, and slid a single sheet across the table. We drafted it last night. After your call. Lucas blinked. What? You think we're monsters? She said, almost wry. We've watched you vanish into deals while your health failed. Your marriage crumbled. Your life turned into a headline. We didn't know about the children. But now we do. She looked at him, truly looked. Go be their father. The company will survive. You might not if you keep running. He stared at the document. His name, his signature, his freedom. With a hand that didn't shake, he signed. And just like that, 5 years of empire building dissolved into ink on paper. By noon, he was back in his car, windows down, city fading in the rearview mirror. But as he turned onto the highway toward the mansion, his phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was tight. Lucas, they know. Know what? The children. Overheard me talking to the lawyer. They think you're leaving forever. His heart stopped. I'm on my way. Right now. Sophia hasn't spoken since. Theo won't leave his room. Daniel. He burned the drawing he made for you. Lucas's breath caught. What? He said if you're gone, the picture doesn't matter. I'm coming, Lucas whispered, pressing harder on the gas. Tell them I'm coming. But the road felt endless. When he finally pulled up to the gate, it was open. No cars. No noise. Just wind rustling the sunflowers. He ran to the front door, heart in his throat. Inside, the house was too quiet, too still. Clara? He called. She appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes red-rimmed. She nodded toward the garden. He found them under the old oak tree, their fort from weeks ago, half collapsed, forgotten. Sophia sat hugging her knees, face buried. Theo kicked at the dirt, silent tears tracking down his cheeks. Daniel stood apart, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the horizon like he was waiting for a storm. Lucas approached slowly, dropping to his knees in the grass. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. I didn't mean for you to hear that. I only went to fix things so I could stay. Sophia didn't look up. You always go. I won't this time, he promised. I signed everything. The house is yours. Mine. Ours. Forever. Daniel turned then, eyes sharp. Prove it. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out the wooden boat. Still whole, still cherished. I kept it every day, even when I was scared. Even when I didn't know if you'd still want me. He held it out. Daniel didn't take it. Not yet. Then Theo whispered, Did you really leave us again? No, Lucas said fiercely. I left to protect you, to make sure no one could ever take this home from you. And now, I'm done. No more meetings. No more suits. Just me. If you'll have me. Sophia finally looked up, eyes swimming. Even when we're mad? Especially then, he said, echoing his own words back to her. A long silence. Wind in the leaves. Distant birdsong. Then, slowly, Daniel stepped forward and took the boat. He turned it in his hands, then placed it gently in Lucas's palm again. Keep it, he said. But stay. Lucas nodded, tears spilling over. I'm staying. Sophia crawled into his lap. Theo leaned against his shoulder, and Daniel, after a heartbeat, rested his head on Lucas's arm. Clara watched from the porch, hand over her mouth, tears streaming silently, because in that moment, under the old oak, the broken pieces didn't magically fuse back together, but they leaned on each other, and that was enough. Later that night, as rain began to fall softly over the garden, Lucas sat on the back steps, children asleep in their rooms, the signed papers tucked safely in a drawer. Clara joined him, handing him a cup of tea. They believed you, she said quietly. Because I meant it, he replied. This time, I'm not building an empire. I'm building a home. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, she let herself hope. Because some returns aren't grand. They're quiet. They're muddy-kneed. They're made of wooden boats and whispered apologies and the courage to stay, even when you're afraid you don't deserve to. And in that rain-washed night, mornings began with pancakes slightly burnt at the edges. Lucas's attempt to recreate the ones he'd ruined years ago. Afternoons were filled with homework at the kitchen table. Lucas poring over multiplication tables with Theo, helping Daniel research constellations for school. Listening. Really listening. As Sophia practiced her violin, even when the notes screeched. One rainy afternoon, while the children napped, Lucas found Clara in the study, sorting through old photo albums. He sat beside her, shoulder brushing hers, close, but not demanding. You kept everything, he murmured, tracing a picture of a newborn Sophia swaddled in yellow. Even when I wasn't here, you kept me in their story. I kept the truth, she said softly. Not the version I wished for, just what was real. He turned to her. Do you think they'll ever forgive me? She looked at him, eyes clear and steady. They already have. Forgiveness isn't a grand pardon, Lucas. It's 1,000 small choices. Letting you braid hair, sharing a secret, leaving a drawing on your pillow. They're choosing you every day. He swallowed hard. And you? She didn't answer right away. Outside, rain tapped gently on the window pane. I'm choosing to see who you are now, she said finally. Not the man who left, not the tycoon the world admired, but the father who mends toys, who stays through nightmares, who signs away empires just to keep a promise. Before he could respond, the door creaked open. Daniel stood there holding a thick envelope. This came for you, he said, handing it to Lucas. The logo on the front was unmistakable, Valente Group. Lucas's stomach dropped. Clara tensed beside him. But Daniel wasn't scared. He was watching Lucas closely, as if testing him. It's not a threat, he said quietly. I checked. It's from Helena. Lucas opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. The letter read, You left us a company. We leave you this, the deed to the Valente Foundation building downtown. Do with it what your heart says. And Lucas, thank you for reminding us that legacy isn't built in boardrooms, but in backyards. Helena beneath it, a note in smaller script. We converted it into a children's arts center. Your name's on the plaque, but only if you want it. Lucas looked up, stunned. They turned my old office into a place for kids? Clara smiled faintly. Maybe they saw what you finally did. That evening, after dinner, Lucas gathered the children in the garden. I have an idea, he said, kneeling in the damp grass. What if we turned part of the mansion grounds into something for other kids too? A place to draw, build, dream, like your fort, but bigger. Sophia's eyes lit up. Like a magic treehouse? With a telescope, Theo added. And a library nook, Daniel said thoughtfully. Lucas grinned. Exactly. And you three get to design it. As they chattered excitedly, sketching plans in the dirt with sticks, Clara watched Lucas. His hands gesturing wildly, his laughter easy, his eyes never leaving them. Later, as the sun dipped below the trees, she found him alone on the porch, the wooden boat still in his pocket. You're happy, she said. I'm home, he corrected gently. She stepped closer. Do you ever miss it? The power? The world watching your every move? He looked toward the garden, where the children's chalk drawings still glowed on the patio. I thought I was building something that would last. But real legacy isn't in stock prices. It's in the way Theo says papai, like it's the safest word in the world. It's in Sophia trusting me with her sad songs. It's in Daniel finally believing he wasn't a mistake. He turned to her, voice soft. I missed 5 years, but I won't miss one more sunrise with them. Clara's eyes shimmered. Then stay. I am, he said. Not because I have to, but because I finally understand what matters. and as fireflies blinked to life in the gathering dusk, the mansion no longer echoed with ghosts of what was lost. It hummed with the quiet, steady pulse of what was being rebuilt, brick by brick, heartbeat by heartbeat, promise by promise. Because sometimes, the greatest empires aren't made of steel and glass, but of second chances, mended toys. Lucas sat on the edge of Sophia's bed, smoothing her blanket after a bedtime story she'd chosen herself, The Boy Who Carried the Moon. Theo was already asleep down the hall, his stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm. Daniel lingered in the doorway, book in hand, watching. "You coming to stargaze later?" he asked, voice low. Lucas nodded. "If you still want me to." Daniel gave a small shrug, but his eyes said more. "You know the North Star now. That counts." It was a peace offering. A bridge. Lucas smiled. "Then I'll bring the telescope." As Daniel turned to leave, Clara appeared in the hallway, arms crossed, but her expression was unreadable. She waited until Daniel's door closed softly before stepping into Sophia's room. "She fell asleep smiling," Clara said, voice barely above a whisper. "She's been waiting for you to tuck her in like this every night." "I know," Lucas said, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's forehead. "I won't miss another one." Clara sat on the edge of the bed beside him. The silence between them wasn't strained. It was full, heavy with all they hadn't said, all they were learning to say without words. "Tomorrow's the day," she finally murmured. He knew what she meant. The anniversary of the divorce. The day their old life officially ended. And, perhaps, the day their new one could finally begin with truth. "They're ready," she said. "I've seen it in their eyes. They don't just call you Papai out of habit anymore. They mean it, and they deserve to know why it took so long." Lucas's breath caught. What if they hate me after? What if knowing I didn't choose them breaks them? "They already know you didn't know," Clara said gently. "But they need to hear why you left. Not the excuses, the truth. The messy, human truth." He looked down at his hands. The same hands that once signed billion-dollar deals, now calloused from building garden trellises and gluing broken toys. "I'll tell them," he said. "But I want you there. With me." She met his gaze. "Always." The next morning, sunlight bathed the living room. In warmth, the children sat cross-legged on the rug, sensing something important was coming. Clara and Lucas sat facing them, not too close, not too far, just near enough to reach out if needed. Lucas took a deep breath. "I need to tell you a story," he began, voice unsteady but clear, "about a man who thought success meant never falling. He built tall buildings and gave big speeches, but he forgot to come home. He didn't know that while he was building his empire, his wife was growing a miracle, 3 miracles. Sophia's eyes widened. Theo leaned forward. Daniel watched, quiet as stone. "He didn't know because he wasn't listening," Lucas continued, voice cracking. "And by the time he realized what he'd lost, it was too late to go back. But then one rainy day, he drove up to a house he thought was empty, and he saw a little boy who looked just like him." He paused, tears glistening. "That boy was you, Theo." Theo blinked. "So, you really didn't know?" "I swear it," Lucas said, hand over his heart. "If I had known, nothing in this world, not money, not power, not fear, would have kept me away." Clara reached over and gently took his hand. "I stayed silent not to punish him," she told the children, "but to protect you, until I was sure he'd come back, not because he felt guilty, but because he loved you." Sophia's lip trembled. "Do you love us now?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "With everything I am." Daniel studied him for a long moment. Then, quietly, "Why didn't you come back sooner? After you found out?" "Because I was afraid," Lucas admitted. "Afraid I'd fail you again. Afraid you wouldn't want me. But your mama taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when you're scared." Sophia crawled into his lap. Theo leaned against Clara. And after a heartbeat, Daniel moved closer too, just enough to rest his shoulder against Lucas's arm. No one spoke for a while, just breathing, being together. Then Sophia whispered, "Does this mean you're really our papai now? Forever?" Lucas looked at Clara. She gave the smallest nod, yes. "Yes, meu amor," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Forever. Through every storm, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. I'm yours. And you're mine." Daniel finally looked up. "Even when I'm mad?" "Especially then," Lucas said, echoing the words that had first cracked his heart open. In that moment something shifted, not just in the room, but in the very bones of the house. The past wasn't erased. The pain wasn't forgotten, but it was named. And in naming it, they began to heal. Later, as the children ran outside to water the sunflowers, Lucas's new ritual, every evening. Clara stood in the doorway, watching him kneel in the soil beside Theo, showing him how to pack the earth gently around the stems. "He finally sees them," she whispered to herself. And then, softly, to the sky, "Thank you, because some truths take years to speak. But when they're finally told, in love, in humility, in presence, they don't break hearts. They stitch them back together." And under the wide, open sky, 3 children laughed, with the clatter of mismatched dishes at breakfast, with the soft strum of Sophia's violin drifting through open windows on Sunday afternoons. Lucas didn't just stay, he belonged. He'd traded boardrooms for school pickups, quarterly reports for helping Theo with spelling bees, investor calls for late-night talks with Daniel about black holes and bravery. He'd learned to braid hair, though Sophia still giggled at his knots, to cook Clara's favorite feijoada, burnt the first 3 times, and to sit in silence with her on the porch when the weight of old wounds resurfaced. Not to fix, just to be there. One evening, as autumn painted the garden in gold and rust, Lucas found Clara folding laundry in the sunroom. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. How her hair caught the light, how her hands moved with quiet certainty. "You're looking at me like I'm a puzzle you've finally solved," she said without turning. "I'm looking at you like I finally understand the question," he replied softly. She paused, a child's sock in her hand. "And what was the question?" "Whether love could begin again after it broke," he said, stepping closer. "Not as it was, but as we are now." She finally looked at him. Her eyes held no shields this time, just tired hope and something deeper, something like trust. From the garden, Theo's voice rang out. "Papai, come quick." The sunflower opened. They ran together, side by side, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. There it was, the first bloom of the season, tall and bright, petals unfurled to the setting sun, just as Sophia had predicted months ago. The children gathered around it, awestruck. "It followed the light," Daniel murmured, almost to himself. Lucas knelt, pulling them close. "Just like us." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Lucas stood alone in the library, the room that had once been his exile, now filled with their drawings taped to the shelves, with Daniel's books stacked neatly, with a tiny pair of Theo's shoes left by mistake. He opened his laptop, not to check markets, but to finalize plans for the community arts space downtown. The Valente Foundation building now buzzed with children's laughter, paint-splattered floors, and music drifting from open classrooms. On the wall near the entrance, a simple plaque read, "Built for the children who remind us what matters." His name wasn't on it. He'd insisted. A soft knock sounded. Clara stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. "You're still up." "Couldn't sleep," he said, closing the laptop. "Too full." "Of what?" "Gratitude." He looked at her, eyes shining. "I used to think I had everything because I owned things. Now I know I have everything because I'm known. By them. By you." She handed him a mug, their fingers brushing. A spark that no longer burned, but warmed. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I didn't change," he corrected. "I just remembered who I was before the world told me to be someone else." Outside, a night bird called. Wind rustled the last sunflowers. "You know," she said after a long pause, "the lawyer called today. The divorce decree. It's fully voided. Legally, we're no longer bound, to each other or to the past." Lucas's breath caught. "And what does that mean?" She met his gaze, steady, open. It means we're free to choose each other again. Or not. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he set his mug down and took her hands. Calloused from gardening, from holding children, from building a life without him, until he came back. I don't want to be free from you, Clara, he said, voice raw. I want to be with you, not because of the past, not out of obligation, but because every day I wake up and choose you, and you still choose me back. Tears filled her eyes. It's not going to be easy. I know, he said, but nothing worth keeping ever is. She leaned her forehead against his. Then stay. I already have, he whispered, and in that quiet library, surrounded by the echoes of children's dreams and the scent of old paper and new beginnings, two broken hearts didn't heal all at once, but they leaned into each other. Because transformation isn't a single moment, it's 1,000 choices. To show up, to listen, to forgive, to plant sunflowers even when you're not sure they'll bloom. And as the moon rose over the mansion, no longer a monument to loss, but a home stitched back together with courage and second chances. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching Lucas in the yard. He was helping Daniel build a birdhouse, measuring twice, laughing when the hammer slipped, letting Theo supervise from a tiny stool wrapped in a scarf 3 sizes too big. Snow dusted their hair like powdered sugar, and for the first time in years, Clara felt something unfamiliar. Safety. Not the kind bought with locks and lawyers, but the kind built with consistency, with showing up, with love that didn't vanish when the world demanded more. Later, over steaming mugs of cocoa, Sophia curled beside Lucas on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. Mama says birds come back to the same nest every year, she said softly. Is that true? Lucas glanced at Clara across the room. Only if the nest is warm enough to return to. Clara's breath caught. She looked away, but not before he saw the sheen in her eyes. That night, after the children were asleep, she found him on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. You're staying, she said. Not a question, but a quiet acknowledgement. He nodded. I told the foundation board I'll take a permanent advisory role, remote, flexible. No travel. No emergencies that can't wait until morning. He turned to her. My office is now this porch. My boardroom is the kitchen table. And my only shareholders are 3 kids who care more about bedtime stories than balance sheets. She smiled faintly. And what about us? He stood, stepping closer. I don't need a title with you, Clara. Not husband. Not partner. Just someone you trust to stand beside you while we raise them. Someone you'd let lean on you when the past gets heavy. She looked down, then back up, her voice trembling. I spent so long protecting them from you. I forgot to protect my own heart from hoping. I know, he said gently, but hope isn't weakness. It's courage. And you've been the bravest person I've ever known. She let out a shaky breath. They asked me today if we were getting married again. Lucas froze. What did you say? I said, we're building something better than a wedding. We're building a family that chooses each other every day, even when it's hard. He reached for her hand. Then let's keep choosing. She didn't pull away. Instead, she laced her fingers through his, cold but steady. I don't want grand gestures, Lucas. I want truth. I want you to keep showing up, even when the shine wears off. Even when the children grow and need less of you. Even when I'm tired and sharp and not the woman you remember. I don't want the woman I remember, he said softly. I want the one who stayed. The one who raised my children with grace while I was lost. The one who gave me a second chance without promising it would be easy. From inside the house, a floorboard creaked. They turned to see Daniel in the doorway, pajamas askew, holding his wooden boat. I couldn't sleep, he said. Had a dream the boat sank. Lucas knelt. It didn't. It's right here. Daniel handed it to him. Keep it. So you remember, you're home. Lucas pulled him into a hug. Always. Clara watched them. Father and son, quiet and strong. And something inside her unclenched. The fear that had lived in her ribs for years. The worry that love was fragile. that men left, that promises broke like glass, began to soften. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real, messy, human, beautiful. The next morning, over pancakes, still slightly burnt, Sophia announced, "We should have a family meeting." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About us," she said seriously. "We need rules. Like, no more leaving. Even for work." Theo nodded. "And you have to eat broccoli at least once a week." Daniel added, "And if you fight, you say sorry before bedtime." Clara and Lucas exchanged a look, half amused, half awed. "Those sound like good rules," Lucas said. "What's the consequence if someone breaks them?" Sophia thought hard. "They have to plant a sunflower and name it after their mistake." Lucas laughed, a real, full laugh, and pulled her onto his lap. "Deal." That afternoon, as they walked through the frost-kissed garden to plant the first apology sunflower for Lucas's burnt pancakes, Clara took his free hand. "You're not the man who left," she said quietly. "And I'm not the woman who let you go without a word." "No," he agreed. "We're the ones who found our way back. Not to what we lost, but to who we were always meant to be." And as the children dug into the cold earth, laughing and arguing over who got to pour the water, Clara realized something. Peace wasn't the absence of storm. It was the quiet after. When the thunder fades, and all that's left is the sound of your family breathing together in the same warm room. And for the first time in years, one Saturday morning Lucas stood in the grand foyer, the very place where he'd first seen the children, where his world had cracked open. Not with ruin, but revelation. Now he was hanging a new painting on the wall. A vibrant, slightly lopsided canvas the children had made together. In bright blues and yellows, it showed four figures holding hands beneath a sun that looked suspiciously like a fried egg. At the bottom, in Sophia's careful script, "Our family. No takebacks." Clara watched from the hallway, arms crossed, but her eyes were soft. "You really are hanging that in the main hall?" "Where else?" he said, stepping back to admire it. "It's the most honest thing in this house." She smiled faintly and walked over, resting a hand on his arm. "You know, this room used to feel like a museum, cold, perfect, untouchable. And now?" he asked, turning to her. "Now it feels like a home," she said, "because it's lived in, loved, messy." He took her hand. "That's what we're building, isn't it? Not perfection, just us." Later that afternoon, they gathered in the garden for what Daniel had solemnly declared a family summit. Blankets were spread, cookies baked, with Theo's secret ingredient, extra chocolate, and even the wooden boat was present, placed reverently on a tree stump like a gavel. Sophia cleared her throat. "We've been talking," she announced, puffing her chest slightly, "and we think it's time." Lucas exchanged a glance with Clara. "Time for?" "To make it official," Daniel said quietly. "That you're really our family. All of us. Together." Theo nodded vigorously. "No more just visiting. You live here. Always." Clara's breath caught. Lucas's eyes filled. "You mean, you want us to be a family again?" Lucas asked, voice rough. Sophia rolled her eyes, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We already are. But grown-ups like paper, right? So, maybe paper." Clara knelt beside them, heart hammering. "You want us to get married again?" Daniel shrugged. "Only if you want to, but we want everyone to know that we chose each other." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She looked at Lucas, who was already on the verge of breaking. "We don't need a big wedding," he said, voice trembling. "Just the four of us. And a promise. The kind you keep," Theo added seriously. Lucas reached into his pocket. Not for his phone, not for keys, but for the wooden boat. He placed it in the center of the blanket. "This boat floated through storms," he said. "Just like us. And it's still here. Still ours." Clara took his hand. "Then let's do it. Not to fix the past, but to honor the future we're building." The children cheered, quietly, reverently, as if they understood the weight of what they'd just done. That evening, As golden light spilled through the trees, Lucas stood with Clara on the back porch, watching the children chase fireflies. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think love was something you earned by being strong. But with you, with them, I learned it's something you receive by being honest. By being here." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "We're not rewriting the past, Lucas. We're choosing a new ending." He kissed the top of her head. "And this one's ours." Inside the house, the new family portrait hung proudly in the hall. Not framed in gold, but in the quiet certainty of daily love. The mansion no longer stood as a monument to what was lost, but as a living testament to what had been rebuilt. Brick by brick, tear by tear, laugh by laugh. Because a home isn't made of marble or money. It's made of shared silence, of bedtime promises kept, of children who finally believe their father will stay. And in that spring-washed garden, as fireflies blinked like stars come down to earth, for hearts beat together, the garden had been transformed. String lights glowed above a canopy of sunflowers, now tall and golden, their faces turned faithfully toward the late afternoon sun. A simple wooden arch stood beneath the old oak, draped in ivy and white jasmine. There were no guests beyond the four of them. No cameras, no headlines, no witnesses but the wind and the birds who'd nested in the eaves all spring. Inside, Clara stood before the mirror in the room that had once been her sanctuary of solitude. Now it smelled of lavender and hope. She wore a simple ivory dress, sleeves rolled like she was still ready to knead dough or wipe a tear. Her hair was loose, her face bare. No mask, no.